Hey guys, it's Wendy and Jeremy with Elevation Games, and today I'm going to show you how I set up Arkham Horror LCG. It's game day, and so I was coming to set it up and thought that we would stream it to show you all the steps that go into it. So I set this game up usually every week, and I brought Jeremy in here with me because this is kind of a lot of muscle memory for me. So I wanted him here to ask any questions that came up if there was something that I wasn't explaining or just kind of breeze through that you might have questions about. And I'll say everybody has their own method for organizing their game stuff, for setting everything up and getting ready for gameplay. I spent so many hours trying to find a system that worked for us, a method that worked for us. And so I think we finally got a good rhythm going with it, and I wanted to show you the the system that we use. All right, so with that said, I'll show you everything I've got here on the table. So I've got the card deck holders that we use. I'll get to these in a second. Over here, I have the deck boxes where we keep our cards, the player cards that we use. I've got our decks. I've got all of the game bits over here. I have the new Mythos pack that we're going to be playing tonight and the instructions that go with it. And then our gigantic organizer box that we're going to dive into in a minute. So every scenario and every campaign sets up differently. They all have their own little special pieces that make them unique, and that's one of the things I love about Arkham. But you'll see things in here that don't necessarily happen every week, and there are things that happen in a lot of other campaigns that you can do that you won't see. But the basic steps are all the same. So we are traveling down the path to Carcosa currently, and tonight we're going to play the Unspeakable Oath. Okay, so the first thing that I do is get our player decks ready. So I keep them in these deck boxes, and I really like these card deck holders that I picked up on Etsy. We actually have a blog post on elevationgames.com that links to this and talks about all of the different ways that we use them. But we use these deck holders when we play Spirit Island. We use them when we play Lord of the Rings LCG. We use them on a lot of different games, but we play more Arkham than anything else, and so we get them out every week.
It's elevation.games.
What did I say?
Elevationgames.com.
Don't go to elevationgames.com. Go to elevation.games. I am good at this. Thank you, Jeremy.
We might have tried that might have belonged to a squatter who might have wanted the GDP of a small country in order to give us that URL.
He did offer us a discount of half of the GDP of a small country, but instead we just went with Elevation Games. Of course. Okay, so you can see on here, Jeremy and I play with brother Daniel, and I just have each of us in our own box. I use a label maker to put our names on top. So I'll start with Jeremy. He is playing a Mystic that I'm obsessed with. But all I do is take his deck out of here. You can see all of his cards and his player card here on top. And I just pop them all in there together. And we have our places that we sit at our table regularly. And so I just always drop these off on their table place. So Jeremy sits here. So I'm just going to set it over to the side. I do the same thing for Daniel. So one thing that I find interesting about how Daniel keeps his deck is that he, even though we've been playing this game since we finished Gloomhaven in early 21, he still keeps the round sequence card with him at all times. And I think that's so Daniel and so great. Okay, so here is Daniel's deck. You can see he is playing a Survivor. So I'm going to drop his deck in there, his player card, and his round sequence. And I'm going to sit it over here where Daniel sits. And then finally you've got me. I put an action sequence in there as a joke. And so now it just hangs out in my deck box all the time. But I am playing a rogue. And so you can see I've got my deck in there and then my player card. We have these really awesome player mats that I don't have out here on the table now. But again, if you go to elevation.games, you will see a blog post with a link to that. The player mat is, to me, of all of the upgrades that we bought for this game, and we've bought a lot, as you can see here, they're probably my favorite, even more than the storage box, even though the storage box saved my life and my sanity, I feel like, in playing this. So, Jeremy, I'm actually going to hand you this. Jeremy is currently sitting where I sit when we play this. Okay, so that takes care of the first half of our personal player setups. The rest is to get our cards out that we use. We 3D printed these standee holders. I love them. At the time, all we had was the transparent filament instead of a solid, so they're kind of a pastel color instead of those like deep moody colors that you get with Arkham Horror. But I love them, and now that we have the solid filaments, I refuse to print different ones just yet because I really like these. And so you can see I just pop our player cards in there. If you don't have a standee, your player card just sits flat on the board, and that's fine. But these make it easier to just move your characters around. So this is Daniel's Survivor, and I've got Jeremy's Mystic. And then again, Jeremy, I'm going to hand you my standee if you don't mind just sitting it over there.
Hi, Shipperoo, our most dedicated viewer.
Okay, so this is our chaos bag. I'm actually just going to set it over to the side for a second and get our game bits set up. So I have these bit cups over here. I'm obsessed with them. It's another thing that we 3D print. I usually, if we don't have anything coming through the 3D printer, I've got one printed. Someday I will have 1 million of these cups of all different colors, and I still won't feel like I have enough. So these really come in handy if you're going to dump something at the end of the night, because the funnel just forces all the bits. So if you're using like small baggies or anything like that, it really comes in handy. And the first thing I'm going to do is set up our Clue and Doom tokens. And I usually set up 2 of these so that we've got one on each side of the table. That just keeps us from having to reach across the table and or have to ask somebody to get one. That way all 3 of us can reach them. I keep one over on this side of the table, and then if you just set that over there, Jeremy, somewhere, that would be great. Okay, so, and if you've ever played Arkham Horror, you know you use a lot of those Doom and Clue tokens. And so it's always good just to have them at your fingertips. So one thing that we don't use as much now because of the player mats that we use are the brains and the hearts.
We still use those for enemies sometimes.
Sometimes. And so because we do occasionally use them, I always have them on the table. So I've got those in their own little cup. And then when we set up the map, when we're getting ready to play, they're usually just somewhere around the encounter set. So we can reach them if we need them. Okay, so next, I will set up our own little resource cups. And you can see, this is another thing that I just personally like to have my own. I don't want to have to ask someone to pass me resources when I need them. You've got players that you play that just gain a lot of resources. If you think about playing a Seeker and you have Dr. Millen. You're going to need a lot of resources because he's going to earn them. He is my favorite ally, and so, of course, he's just right there at the tip of my tongue. But if you're playing one of those characters that earns a lot or requires a lot of resources, you don't want to have to ask to pass them across the table. So just make each of us our own little cup. And then on our player mat, we use these cubes to track our health, our mental health. And then we have a green where we can track how many actions we've taken. None of us use them, but they look really pretty on the mat, so I always drop them in there with everybody's cup that I make for them. Okay, if you don't mind sitting that over there. I find for us, and everybody's different, but for us, having our own little resource cup just makes the game travel faster. Do you agree with that, Jeremy?
Oh, yeah. I mean, y'all can't see really with the way the cameras are set up. We don't have a huge game table, but it's decent size.
That's right.
BoardGameTables.com. Thank you. Thank you. We paid it. We bought it.
Yeah.
but it's a good game table.
Thank you for making it. Yeah.
Yeah. It is big enough that having that stuff near you is helpful rather than having to reach all the way across.
That's right. And I play with two brothers who have abnormally long arms, and so it's easy for them to just reach across the table and get whatever they need. And then for me, I always feel kind of like a penguin because I'm like, ooh, hand me something. Okay, so the last thing I'm going to set up here in these little bit cups is going to be our directional arrows. So this is another 3D printed upgrade that we made on our 3D printer, and it for us is really helpful because it shows where you can travel in between locations. On some scenarios you go through and it's super easy because everything's in a straight line, or the scenario we played last week, it was a building, and so you just had 3 floors, and so you traveled up a stairway, which went in the middle, up the floors, and you could go anywhere on that floor that you wanted. But some of the player maps are really complex and really confusing. So we use these arrows to help us keep track of that. And also, Daniel is our location master. Daniel keeps up with all of the locations, and he manages these because he is really good about just setting everything up and knowing where you can go and laying everything out. Is that funny?
I was just going to say it keeps his very particular brain occupied.
That is, yes. And for me, who's easily distracted, and there's a lot of words, there's a lot of reading that goes in to Arkham Horror. It's hard for me to just focus on everything and to remember, and so letting Daniel keep this for someone like me who's easily distracted, it allows me to remember where I can go. So I keep these for him. He used to just set them down on the table, but our tabletop is felt, and so these would kind of grab onto the felt when he was trying to grab one, so it's just easier to keep it in the bit cups. Okay, I'm going to set these aside for Daniel over here. Okay, so now let's get down to the fun stuff. I've got the instructions for how we're going to set everything up, as far as like which encounter decks we're going to pull in here, or which encounter sets we're going to use to build our encounter deck. I have saved you the tedium that comes from sleeving all of the cards that come in the Mythos pack. So this is just something that I do early in the morning. It's very meditative, and it just helps keep our cards in good working order. So for the scenario cards, we don't necessarily need to sleeve those because we use them a handful of times as we make our way through a campaign. For the items, they do need to be sleeved, I think, because we play with them over and over and over again. Like these item cards, once they come into our player boxes, they can go, we'll use them over and over and over again through this campaign and the next. So to protect them, we keep them in these I use a penny sleeve to sleeve them all up. But because sometimes you're pulling cards from an encounter set into your player deck, I always want to make sure that you keep a sleeve on everything so that it's not obvious of, oh, well, I've got an enemy in my hand, but I know it doesn't have a sleeve on it, so I know when it's coming, and you can kind of prepare for it. Just helps you to maintain that. So I'm going to set up the cards that our players use. I'm going to actually just push this out of the way a little bit. So you can see these. These are just quarter deck boxes that we use. We've got one for each class, and then the neutral cards. I use a label maker to label what everything is. And then inside each one of these, we have dividers. So there is a website, again, it's linked in a blog post, just Arkham Horror Setup on Elevation.games. There is a man who has created these dividers for every single Arkham scenario, every single Arkham player class. He has just put in a lot of effort for these, and I just printed these off on cardstock. And I just realized I pulled that out. Oops. So I'll start with neutral because I already have it out, and I've pulled out the divider. So I keep the I keep these sorted. I keep these sorted in two different ways. So the first is I keep the cards that are base 0 in the back. As a general rule, we only use these early on in a campaign, and then we grab new ones or we upgrade these as we go through. So then there are any of the +1s that come after that. But I also keep these sorted by type, by the cost that it takes to play them. So you can see this is, I don't know if you can see that, but this is a one resource cost. These are 2, and then they go in order. And that just makes it easier for us when we go in and build decks. So each week when we are upgrading our decks, I can look at the new cards, I can upgrade my cards, I can go through and spend my XP. It takes me about 5 minutes. It takes Jeremy and Daniel a really long time. They're very thoughtful about the cards that they pull into their hands, but having them organized as effectively as possible just kind of helps to speed up that process that can get long sometimes. So I'm going to just sort these out by class. So we've got our rogue, our seeker, our guardian, mystic, survivor, and then the neutral. So each week when I'm going in and setting up these decks, I take any new cards and I put them in the front of the box. That way, when we are going in and building our decks, anything that's new, you know, you always get those new, exciting, fun cards. And a lot of times they are scenario specific, or they're more helpful in the Path to Carcosa than they would be in the Forgotten Age, because we're playing the Path to Carcosa. So I keep those in the very front, and then any cards that Jeremy, Daniel, and me take out of our hands when we're upgrading, we just stick them in the front, and then everything gets filed where it goes in the box when I am cleaning up the game, usually the next morning. So there's the neutrals.
And we know a lot of people will say to just open all of the packs, and put all of the cards in there at the start. We kind of like to do it this way, but because frankly, this is how people experienced them as they came out.
That's right.
You know, we're coming to it, you know, in some cases, in this case for sure, years after the fact, when the entire thing has been out for quite a while. But for people who were playing it when it was new, they didn't have access to everything. They had to wait for that next pack to hit. So
that's right. I am not a person who is good with delayed gratification. I have the patience of a toddler, And so for me not to just go in and open up every pack and get everything sleeved and get everything ready and all of the cards in here from the jump, I am surprised at how easy that is for me. But it is just how we choose to play the game. So you can see I'm just going through and doing this with every class. And then I'll just set these boxes out of the way. So I used to keep these in deck boxes like this. And we would just have Guardian cards. And then we had a deck box for Guardian base 0 and then Guardian +1s. And when we finished up the Circle Undone, they were just kind of busting at the seams. And that's when we upgraded to these quarter deck boxes. And I feel like when we finish, not the Path to Carcosa, but whichever one we play next, we'll have to upgrade even that to like a half deck box. But we will cross that bridge when we get there. Okay, so I'm just going to set these over to the side now because we will use those before we start the campaign tonight. And now let's get into the exciting game-specific stuff, right? So I use an app to set everything up. I use our campaign log. I keep our campaign log in an app. For me, it's just easier to write it down or to keep up with. A lot of times I'll use a dual system, which really came in handy when I accidentally threw my phone off a third story patio when we were on vacation and lost my phone and had to get a new one with no backup. I was thankful for that paper system for Arkham games, but when it comes to setup, the app is just really helpful, more helpful for me than the paper that comes with it, because it answers all the questions that you have to answer. So because I'm trying to keep this lo-fi, I just went ahead and marked the setup pieces that we need on here. And I will say this, I don't read ahead. I don't skip ahead. It's hard for me sometimes to not know what to expect or what's coming, but I just check to make sure there's not something that we need to keep up with on the setup pages, and then I usually just skip straight to the setup piece that tells you the encounter decks that you need. So this is our organizer box. I love this. I bought it on Etsy. It was sorry, Jeremy. I don't know if you knew this or not, but it was about $85. Worth it.
That's how much I spent on my Gloomhaven organizer.
Okay. Yeah. Yes. This organizer to me is so worth it because it just keeps up with everything. You have everything in one place. I tried, because we've been playing this game since 2020. It's when Jeremy and I started playing it together. We started playing it with Daniel early in 2021. So we've been playing it for about a year and a half, the three of us together now. And we just so many different methods to organize all of the cards, and with each campaign that you finish you get more. And one thing I really like about this box is you have, like, I've got the base right here, and all of the encounter sets, because you use those no matter which campaign you're doing. You're going to use those base. And then I've got our current scenario here, so I've got the Path to Carcosa, and then the 3 scenarios that we've completed already are over here, just in case we ever need them. I don't know why we would, but they're here and in one place, so that keeps them from being in deck boxes over here, or a shoebox in the closet, or in the game closet. It just keeps everything together in one place, which for me makes it very easy to manage this. I also keep all of our player cards and this is how many scenario agenda and act decks that we finished since the very first one, The Gathering. What do you have a question?
Yeah, so we have 2 of these. You got one for the Lord of the Rings.
I did.
LCG as well. Did those both come from the same person?
They did.
Okay.
They did.
We'll drop a... I'm guessing you don't remember the name off the top of your head.
From the Etsy shop?
Uh-huh.
No, but we can just put a link.
Yeah, we'll put a link in the video after this goes up.
Yeah, absolutely. And then also a link for the player mats that we use because they're great, and for these deck stacks that we use. All 3 of those came from Etsy, and no complaints at all for those. Big fans. Our Lord of the Rings box is horizontal storage instead of the vertical. But that's really the only difference, and it makes it nice because now if we're going on a vacation, like if we're going to go stay in a cabin or if we're going to go in a car somewhere where it's reasonable to take, we can just grab the box and go, and now this game can travel with us, which we couldn't even travel from one room to another with this game and keep everything in order before. So like, again, this box, I can't talk about it enough. Okay. So, I am going to just pull out all of the encounter sets that I need. There is the Unspeakable Oath. That's the new one that we're getting this week. And then the second one I need is Haster's Gift. Because I've got the instructions in front of me, I can use the technical names for these. I normally don't. When Jeremy and I used to set this game up together, he would use the technical names because he was looking at the paper, and I would be like, Haster's Gift, what is that? Oh, is it the Puppet Master? Because that's what this one looks like to me. So
yeah, the graphic design on all these is really excellent. They give you little symbols for everything, and I know you were worried, I think, at one point about us not using the technical names for things, but literally any streamer I've seen who plays these games refers to, books and heads and fists.
Right.
They don't call it. You know what? I don't even know what these are. I think one is agility.
It is
knowledge.
Foot. It's intellect.
Strength, maybe.
Not strength.
Or fight.
Oh man, it just left me.
Yeah, so I mean, it's head, books, fist, and foot.
Right. And rabbit, squirrel, my favorite descriptor of encounters. But they do a good job. There's a lot of thought that goes into how they identify these things. It allows for visual management, which makes this a lot easier and a lot smoother of a process. So I pulled out all of our encounter sets. I'm going to go ahead and put the lid back on here so I can use it. I'm always scared because this side of the lid, I didn't put wood glue on it. I put wood glue on everything else and forgot one. And so it falls off. It just falls off. Okay, so now I've got all of the encounter sets set up here. As well as our act and agenda deck. I'm going to put them up on top of the box. So everything is here, sorted. Again, I'm not like reading ahead because I don't want to know, but anytime I see this lady right here, I know that we're in for a rough night. Because that is the roughest encounter set I think we've ever seen. It's hard. Okay, set each monster enemy among the gathered encounter sets aside. Okay. There's one monster, 2. So it says there should be 7. So when I was talking about how there will be special instructions that go with all of these, this is not something that you'll have to do, obviously, every single time you play. Wait, those are locations. Monster, elite monster. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Jeremy, did you know that there was this much that went into setting up this game every week?
No, but I had an inkling. I know it takes you a lot of work.
Okay, looking for one more monster. These like roach swarm cards. It's really scary. I need one more monster. Come on. There we go. Oh, wait.
It said to pull out a specific number of monsters?
It says just set each monster enemy. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Oh, 7. Okay. I counted wrong the first time. Then it says to set it aside. So, usually with any campaign setup, it's going to tell you to set certain cards aside. I hold on to those for us, and so each of us kind of has our own job when we're playing. Daniel is the
location czar.
He is. He's the location czar. That's what I call him. We're the secretary of the interior. Jeremy just kind of drives the game. He's the one that keeps up with this. He keeps up with the agenda deck and the act decks, and then I keep up with just everything else that kind of falls over to the side. Okay, and then it also says to pull aside lunatic. So 1, 2, 3. There's 7 of these as well. Sounds like we've got fun stuff coming our way.
Cool.
But again, that's locations. Roach swarm. So, Jeremy, while I'm pulling these out, what do you think about the Path to Carcosa so far?
It's neat. It's hard to say for sure yet. We're what? 3? No, are we even 3 in?
This is the 4th.
Okay.
Yeah, I had to look over and make sure.
There are some pieces that the shoe hasn't dropped on, you know, like we keep getting doubt or conviction.
Sure.
And no idea what that's going to turn into, but I assume it's going to come back to bite us at some point.
That's right.
So yeah, it's been a pretty solid scenario. I know it's a lot of people's favorite. So it'll be interesting to see if we come out feeling that way as well.
So, like a lot of folks who play Arkham LCG, we started playing and you could not get the Path to Carcosa. It just wasn't available. And so I would search like every 2 or 3 days to see if there were any of them available, just like online, buying one-offs, got ripped off a few times, and then finally we just gave up. And when we finished with the Dunwich Legacy, we just skipped the Path to Carcosa and went on. So the recent reprint has empowered us to go ahead and fill in all the gaps that we had in our collection, which is good. And started, I love it. I love the story. I love everything about it. So it asked me to set 4 of these locations aside. We're gonna have to choose. So I set those aside for Daniel and let him just handle it. And then I'm gonna set these over here for him. And there is a card. I had it set aside, and now I can't find it. Still. It's telling me to set Daniel Chesterfield aside. Okay, well, we'll find Daniel Chesterfield before we play. In each copy of Patient Confinement. Straight Jacket. Man, this seems fun.
This is a lot of cards set aside.
Yes.
This is not how this usually goes. I think the Dream Eaters was the last one we did, right?
No. The last one we did was the Circle Undone.
Oh, that's right.
Dream Eaters, I think, is next, though.
Okay.
Okay, so I've got the extra locations set to this side, too. Put the following locations into play. I'll let Daniel handle that. And then there's one more thing left for me to do here, and that is... And this scenario, I will say, has had me update the Chaos Bag more than anyone that we've ever done. So normally it's just like, what mode are you going to play on? Easy, standard. We play on standard. Easy, standard, hard, like expert is the other one. I was like, what do they call the like super hard? But I feel like every week we're taking stuff out and adding stuff in, which is wild.
Literally every scenario has had us change it at the end.
This is the first time that it's had me change it at the beginning, though, so I'm adding a -3 to our Chaos Bag, which doesn't sound fun. Does not sound fun at all. Okay, so these remaining cards, these will be the encounter deck. So I take all these guys, I'll shuffle them up, and then I always have Daniel shuffle them a second time, and they just go into their own little card box here. So I'll show you, I'll tilt this up a little bit so that you can see why I like these so much. So you've got your encounter set here. You can't see your card. It's face down. You take it out, you read it, you do whatever's on there, and then you can deposit it into the bottom. So it's got it's separated on there, which makes it really nice to keep track of the cards that you've done, your discard piles. And then when you're ready to shuffle your discard pile back in, you just take them from the bottom into the top, which is great. The same thing applies to our own player decks. I like it. Mm-hmm. It's to me it was a really good upgrade.
Yeah, they're nice. I like them.
So the last thing that we do before I sign off here is get the agenda deck ready for Jeremy. So again, he is our game master.
Narrator and so at best.
I have no idea how he sets these up or anything that he does with it. So I just put the whole stack together. But this holder is great because it has a side for the agenda and a side for the act. So you can just keep your act on one side, your agenda on the other. You can keep your doom, you can keep your clues here if you want to, and then when you're done with that, you just stick it in the bottom, grab the next one, and go on. Just helps keep the game moving because, again, like there's a lot of moving parts that go into Arkham, and so anything that you can do to just kind of keep everything moving and not have to search for things is good in my book.
Yeah.
And we use this sometimes with Lord of the Rings too. So, okay. Any final thoughts? Any final... Okay. Well then I'm gonna get this box put away because now all of our setup is done. So we're ready to just rock and roll whenever Daniel gets here and we're ready to play. So I just put this back on the shelf, set these guys out in the middle of the table while we build our decks, and then just set them aside out of the way too. And then we have our whole table to play the game.
Yeah.
All right. Well, we'll see you tonight when we start the Unspeakable Oath.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.